You keep chasing goals that slip through your fingers. You set intentions, make plans, visualize success, but somehow life keeps delivering the opposite of what you want. What if the problem isn't your effort? What if everything you've been taught about manifesting is backwards? The Stoics figured out a secret 2,000 years ago that most people still miss today. They understood that wanting something and manifesting something require completely opposite approaches. This isn't about positive thinking or vision boards. Those might make you feel good temporarily, but they don't rewire reality. What I'm about to share works differently. These 10 Stoic principles don't just help you get what you want, they fundamentally change who you become in the process, which is why they actually work. By the end of this series, you'll understand why your current approach keeps failing and what to do instead. Let's start with the foundation, because without this first principle, nothing else matters. Control what you can, release what you can't. Sounds simple, right? Everyone nods along when they hear this, but watch how people actually live. They obsess over outcomes they can't control while ignoring the actions they can. Someone wants a promotion, so they worry about what their boss thinks, what their co-workers might say, whether the timing is right. All that mental energy burns up on things completely outside their influence. Meanwhile, the actual work that would make them promotable, half done, distracted, inconsistent. Your mind has limited bandwidth. Every minute spent anxious about uncontrollable outcomes is a minute stolen from controllable actions. The Stoics saw this clearly. Epictetus taught his students to draw a bright line between what's up to them and what isn't. Your effort, yours. Your attitude, yours. Your consistency, yours. Other people's opinions, not yours. The final outcome, not yours. Economic conditions, not yours. Most manifestation advice gets this catastrophically wrong. It tells you to focus intensely on the outcome, to visualize it in vivid detail, to feel it as if it's already happened. But here's what actually occurs when you do that. You create attachment. You build an entire emotional structure around something you don't control. Then when reality doesn't cooperate exactly as you imagined, that structure collapses and takes your motivation with it. Try this instead. Identify the specific actions only you can take. Not the results of those actions, just the actions themselves. You can control showing up. You can control the quality of your focus during the time you allocate. You can control whether you follow through on your word to yourself. Pour your energy there into that narrow channel of genuine control. Everything else? Note it, acknowledge it exists, then let it move through your awareness without gripping it. I spent years doing the opposite. I'd set a goal, then spend hours imagining the victory, the recognition, how it would feel when everything worked out. Know what happened? I'd get a small hit of dopamine from the fantasy, which reduced my actual motivation to do the work. My brain already got its reward. Meanwhile, the real actions that might have produced real results got delayed, diminished, deprioritized. The shift happened when I stopped asking, "What do I want to happen?" and started asking, "What can I actually do today?" That question cuts through all the fog. It bypasses the anxiety about outcomes and lands you directly in the space where you have power. You might not control whether your business succeeds, but you control whether you make those sales calls today. You might not control whether someone loves you back, but you control whether you show up as your best self. This principle doesn't mean you abandon goals. Goals provide direction, but your daily focus must stay locked on process, not outcome. The archer aims at the target but focuses on stance, breath, and release. The target doesn't move closer because you stare at it harder. What makes this so powerful for manifestation? When you release attachment to outcomes, you eliminate the desperate energy that repels what you want. Desperation broadcasts need. Need implies lack. You can't manifest abundance from a foundation of lack. But when you focus purely on controllable actions, you move through the world differently. Calm, grounded, effective. That energy attracts opportunity because it signals capability, not neediness. People sense this shift even if they can't articulate it. The job candidate who's anxiously attached to getting hired comes across completely different from the candidate focused simply on demonstrating their value. Same resume, different energy, different results. Here's the test. Think about something you want right now. Notice how your body feels when you focus on whether you'll get it. Tension, anxiety, tightness in your chest. That's attachment. Now shift your focus. What's one action within your complete control that moves you in that direction? Notice how that feels different, steadier, more grounded. That's where your power lives. The Stoics didn't develop this principle to sound wise. They developed it because they lived through chaos. Exile, political upheaval, betrayal, loss. They needed a philosophy that actually worked when everything fell apart. What they discovered is that you can't control the storm, but you can control your sail. You can't control the obstacles, but you can control your response. This becomes your foundation. Everything else we'll explore builds on this distinction between control and release. Because once you truly internalize where your power lives, the other 9 principles start clicking into place naturally. They stop being abstract ideas and become practical tools. But there's something most people miss about this first principle. Something that determines whether it actually works in your life or just remains a nice concept you nod along with. Most people think they're practicing detachment, but they're actually practicing avoidance. They say I'm letting go of outcomes while secretly checking their phone every 10 minutes hoping the text arrived, the email came through, the opportunity appeared. That's not detachment. That's suppression with extra steps. Real detachment looks different. It's not passive. It's not sitting around hoping the universe handles everything. It's intense action paired with emotional release. You work harder than ever before, but you stop strangling the results with your anxiety. Here's what changed everything for me. I realized attachment creates a specific kind of suffering. Not the suffering of not getting what you want. The suffering of constantly measuring the gap between where you are and where you think you should be. Every moment becomes infected with evaluation. Am I closer? Is it working? Should I be further along? That voice never shuts up because you've made your peace conditional on an outcome you don't control. The solution isn't to stop wanting things. Desire drives action. The solution is to relocate your satisfaction from the destination to the journey. Sounds like a bumper sticker, I know. But there's a practical method here. When you take action purely because it aligns with your values, not because you're trying to force an outcome, something shifts. You're no longer trading your present peace for a future possibility. You're at peace now, while building toward what matters. The action becomes its own reward because it reflects who you've decided to be. I tested this with a project that terrified me. Instead of obsessing over whether it would succeed, I asked different questions each morning. Did I show up today? Did I do work I'm proud of? Did I move with integrity? Those questions I could actually answer. They gave me wins every single day, regardless of external results. 3 months in, the project took off. But here's what surprised me. The success felt less intense than I'd imagined because I'd already been experiencing satisfaction daily through the process. The outcome was great, sure, but I hadn't been miserable waiting for it. Compare that to previous projects where I'd attached everything to results. I'd accomplished some of those goals too, but the victory always felt hollow because I'd spent months in anxious misery getting there. I'd traded weeks of peace for a moment of relief. Terrible exchange rate. This connects directly to the second principle, and it's where most manifestation teaching completely falls apart. They tell you to visualize, affirm, believe, but they skip the part that actually matters. The second principle is understanding that your state creates your reality, not the other way around. Most people have this backwards. They think once they get the relationship, the money, the success, then they'll feel peaceful, confident, abundant. So they spend all their energy chasing those external things, believing the feelings will follow. It doesn't work that way. Your external world reflects your internal state, not occasionally, not when you get lucky, always. This isn't mystical, it's mechanical. When you're in a state of lack, you make decisions from lack. You take jobs you hate because you're afraid there's nothing better. You stay in relationships that drain you because you don't believe you'll find anything else. You play small because you're scared of losing what little you have. Those fear-based decisions create more experiences that confirm lack. When you're in a state of abundance, even if your bank account doesn't reflect it yet, you make completely different choices. You negotiate better because you're not desperate. You walk away from what doesn't serve you because you trust in your value. You take smart risks because you believe in your ability to create. Those confidence-based decisions create experiences that confirm abundance. Your state is your filter. It determines what opportunities you notice, which ones you pursue, how you show up in conversations, what risks you're willing to take, and how people respond to your energy. Here's the practical application. Stop trying to get things so you can feel better. Start generating the feeling first, then take action from that place. This isn't about faking it. It's about recognizing that the feeling you're chasing already exists within you. You've felt confident before. You've felt abundant before. You've felt worthy before. Those states live in your nervous system. You can access them right now. The method is simple but requires practice. Before any important action, any conversation that matters, any moment where you'd normally operate from fear, pause. Ask yourself how the version of me who already has what I want would show up right now. Not what they'd do, how they'd feel. Then generate that state first, then act. The first few times feel awkward. You're essentially acting as if. But here's what happens. When you show up in that elevated state, people respond differently. Opportunities appear you wouldn't have noticed from your previous state. Doors open that were always there but invisible to your fear-based filter. I watched this play out with someone close to me. She spent 2 years complaining about her career while doing nothing to change it. She was waiting for the perfect opportunity to appear so she'd feel confident enough to make a move. I asked her to flip it, spend 1 month acting as if she already had the career she wanted. How would that version of her show up to her current job? What would she wear? How would she communicate? What risks would she take? She committed to 30 days. Within 3 weeks, her boss offered her a project she'd never have been considered for previously. Not because the boss suddenly changed, because she was showing up differently, speaking up in meetings, contributing ideas instead of staying silent. Her elevated state made her visible in a new way. Within 6 months, she'd moved to a completely different company, doubled her salary, and kept telling me she couldn't believe how fast everything shifted. But it wasn't fast. She'd been ready for years. She just wasn't operating from the right state. The opportunity didn't create her confidence. Her confidence created the opportunity. Most people have this backwards their entire lives. They're waiting for external validation to give them permission to feel differently. The job offer to feel successful. The relationship to feel loved. The money to feel abundant. But those external things are effects, not causes. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. Change what you are, and what you attract changes automatically. This is where people get stuck. They'll do the morning routine, say the affirmations, visualize the outcome, then spend the other 23 hours of their day in complete contradiction to that state. You can't meditate your way into abundance for 10 minutes, then spend the rest of your day complaining about bills. The complaining is a stronger signal than the meditation. Your dominant state wins. Always. So the work isn't about adding more practices. It's about catching yourself throughout the day when you slip back into lack, fear, or unworthiness, then consciously shifting back. Every single time. That's the practice. Not once in the morning. All day long. You're essentially retraining your nervous system to operate from a new baseline. Right now, your baseline is probably some version of not enough. Not enough time, money, opportunities, love, whatever. That baseline feels normal to you because you've practiced it for years. Shifting to a new baseline feels weird at first. Uncomfortable, like you're lying to yourself. That discomfort is actually a good sign. It means you're pushing against old patterns. The weirdness fades. The new state becomes familiar. Then it becomes automatic. Then it becomes who you are. I'm not going to pretend this is easy. Changing your internal state while your external circumstances still look the same requires serious mental discipline. You're essentially telling your brain to ignore all the evidence it's collected about your limitations and operate as if different evidence exists. Your brain resists this. It wants to keep you safe, and safe means familiar, even if familiar is miserable. So you have to override that resistance consciously, repeatedly, until the new pattern becomes stronger than the old one. Here's what makes this worth it. Once you crack this, once you realize you can generate any state you want independent of circumstances, you become unstoppable. Not because life gets easier, Because you stop waiting for it to get easy before you show up powerfully. You stop negotiating with reality. You stop making excuses. You just decide who you're being today and you be that. The circumstances catch up eventually. They always do. But you don't wait for them anymore. You lead. Think about the people you admire most. The ones who seem to move through life with this unshakable certainty. They're not lucky, they're not more talented. They've just mastered their state. They've trained themselves to operate from power regardless of what's happening around them. You can develop that same capacity. It's a skill, not a gift. Skills can be learned, but you have to practice every day. Multiple times a day, catching yourself in lack and consciously shifting to abundance, catching yourself in fear and consciously shifting to courage, catching yourself in unworthiness and consciously shifting to knowing your value. At first, the shifts last seconds, then minutes, then hours. Eventually, the elevated state becomes your new normal. And you have to consciously shift down to access the old patterns. That's when you know the work is complete. Let me give you something practical to start with today. Pick one feeling state you want to embody more consistently. Maybe it's confidence, maybe it's peace, maybe it's creative flow. Whatever it is, identify one physical anchor for that state. Could be a specific way you hold your body, a breathing pattern, a phrase you repeat internally, something tangible that signals to your nervous system this is the state we're accessing now. Every time you notice yourself slipping into the opposite state, use that anchor immediately. Don't wait until you feel like it. Don't negotiate, just shift. The feeling will follow the action. Do this for 7 days straight. Not perfectly, you'll forget, you'll slip. That's expected. Just keep coming back to the practice. By day 7, you'll notice something different. The elevated state will be easier to access. It'll last longer. You'll catch yourself in the old state faster. That's progress. That's the skill developing. Now imagine doing that for a month, 6 months, a year. Imagine who you'd become if you spent the next year consciously choosing your state instead of letting circumstances dictate it. That version of you already exists, not in some distant future, right now, as a potential. Every choice you make either moves you toward that version or away from it. Every moment you spend in lack takes you further away. Every moment you spend in your chosen state brings you closer. This isn't about positive thinking. It's about conscious creation. You're not pretending everything is perfect. You're choosing how you show up regardless of whether it's perfect. That choice compounds, day after day, moment after moment, until the person you're becoming is so far removed from the person you were that your old limitations don't even make sense anymore. The life you want isn't out there waiting for you to find it. You're building it from the inside out through the state you embody. Most people wait for permission. They wait for proof. They wait for someone else to validate their vision before they fully commit to it. But validation doesn't create reality. Decision does. The moment you decide who you are, regardless of current evidence, you set forces in motion that most people never access. This isn't abstract philosophy, it's mechanics. Your state broadcasts a signal. That signal organizes your perception, which shapes your choices, which creates your results. Change the signal. Change everything downstream. But you can't fake the signal. Your nervous system knows the difference between genuine embodiment and performance. You might fool other people temporarily, but you won't fool reality. The universe responds to what you actually are, not what you're pretending to be. So how do you become something before you have evidence of it? You practice the internal experience of already being it, not the external trappings, the internal reality. What does the version of you who's already successful feel like inside? Not what do they own or where do they live, what do they feel? Probably calm, certain, unhurried. They're not trying to prove anything because there's nothing to prove. They're not chasing validation because they're already full. They move through the world from sufficiency, not scarcity. That's the state you're cultivating. Right now, today. Regardless of your bank account or relationship status or any other external metric, you're training your system to operate from the internal experience of already having arrived. Here's what shifts when you do this consistently. Opportunities you couldn't see before suddenly become obvious, not because they weren't there, but because your perception was filtered through lack. When you shift to abundance, the filter changes. You notice different things. Conversations that would have passed by unnoticed suddenly spark ideas. Resources you already had access to suddenly seem useful. Connections that were always available suddenly feel relevant. Nothing external changed. Your lens changed. That's the power of state. It determines what you can perceive, which determines what you can access. Two people can walk through the exact same environment and have completely different experiences based solely on the state they're operating from. Same reality, different perception. Your current circumstances are the result of past states. The states you were operating from weeks, months, years ago created the patterns that generated what you're experiencing now, which means your future circumstances are being created by the state you're in right now, not tomorrow. Right now. This moment is generative. What you're embodying in this exact second is planting seeds for what you'll experience later. That's why the practice matters so much. Every time you choose the elevated state over the reactive state, you're authoring future reality. Most people don't realize they're creating constantly. They think creation is something you do occasionally, like when you set a goal or make a plan. But creation is happening every single moment through the state you're broadcasting. You're either creating consciously or unconsciously, but you're always creating. The question is whether you're creating deliberately or by default. Default creation is what happens when you let circumstances dictate your state. Something external shifts and you react. That reaction becomes your state, which broadcasts a signal which creates more of the same circumstance. It's a loop most people never escape. Conscious creation breaks the loop. You choose the state first, regardless of circumstance. That state broadcasts a different signal which opens different possibilities, which creates different results. The circumstance shifts to match the state instead of the state reacting to the circumstance. It's a complete inversion of how most people operate. And it feels unnatural at first because you've been conditioned to believe circumstances should determine how you feel. But that belief is the cage. The moment you realize you can choose your state independent of circumstance, the cage dissolves. You're free. Not free from challenges or difficulties, free to choose how you meet them. That freedom is what changes everything. Let me be direct about what this requires: vigilance, constant awareness of what state you're operating from. Most people spend entire days in reactive states without noticing. They wake up, check their phone, absorb whatever energy is in their feed, and carry that state through their morning. Then something happens at work or in traffic and they shift to frustration or stress. They carry that through lunch. Then a conversation triggers insecurity or comparison and they shift again. By evening, they're exhausted from all the unconscious state changes, but they don't know why. They just know they're drained. That's the default pattern. Unconscious reaction to everything external. The alternative is simple but demanding. You set your state intentionally when you wake up. Before you check anything external, you choose the internal experience you're committing to for the day. Then you defend that state all day. Every time you notice yourself slipping into reaction, you pause and reset. Not later, immediately. This isn't about suppressing emotion. You can feel frustrated or disappointed or uncertain and still maintain your chosen state underneath it. The emotion moves through. The state remains. Think of state as the foundation and emotions as weather. Weather changes constantly. Rain, sun, wind, calm. But the foundation stays solid regardless of what's happening on the surface. You're building that foundation through practice. Each time you reset, each time you choose, each time you return to center despite what's swirling around you, the foundation gets stronger. Eventually it becomes so solid that external circumstances can't shake it. You remain yourself regardless of what's happening. That's mastery, not control over external reality, control over internal experience. And paradoxically, when you master internal experience, external reality starts reflecting it back. Not because you're manipulating anything, because you've become a clear signal instead of static noise. Reality can work with clarity. It can't work with confusion. Your job is to become so clear in your state that there's no mixed signal. No mixed signal means your thoughts, feelings, and actions align with the state you've chosen. When there's misalignment, you create interference. You say you're confident, but your body language screams doubt. You claim you're at peace, but your thoughts loop through worst-case scenarios. You declare you're ready, but your actions suggest hesitation. That interference confuses the signal. Reality doesn't know which frequency to respond to, so you get mixed results or no results. Clarity comes from integration. What you think, feel, and do must point in the same direction. That's when momentum builds. That's when things start moving in ways that feel almost effortless. Not because effort disappeared, but because you stopped working against yourself. Here's what most people miss. They focus on changing circumstances while maintaining the same state. They want different results but keep broadcasting the same signal. They're trying to tune into a new station while staying on the old frequency. It doesn't work that way. The frequency has to shift first. Once it does, the station changes automatically. You don't force the change. You allow it by becoming the match for what you want to experience. This is where patience becomes essential. You've been broadcasting a certain signal for years, maybe decades. That signal has created patterns, relationships, circumstances that reflect it. When you shift your state and start broadcasting differently, there's a lag. The old patterns don't dissolve instantly. The old circumstances don't vanish overnight, but they will shift if you maintain the new signal consistently. Most people give up during the lag. They change their state for a few days or weeks, don't see immediate external changes, and conclude it doesn't work. Then they revert to the old state, which reactivates the old signal, which reinforces the old patterns. They prove themselves right. It doesn't work, except it does. They just didn't give it enough time to reorganize around the new frequency. Think of it like moving a satellite dish. You adjust the angle, but there's a moment where you're pointed at the new position and still receiving the old signal. If you give up during that moment and move the dish back, you'll never lock onto the new station. You have to hold the new position through the static until the signal comes through clearly. That's the practice. Holding your state through the lag. Through the period where nothing seems different externally, but everything is different internally, that's the test. Can you maintain your chosen state when there's no evidence yet that it's working? Because that's when it's actually working. The reorganization is happening beneath the surface before it becomes visible. If you collapse back into the old state during this period, you abort the process right before it would have completed. So how long do you hold it? As long as it takes. There's no timeline. Some shifts happen quickly, others take sustained practice over months. But here's what you need to understand. The moment you attach a deadline, you create resistance. You're saying, I'll maintain this state, but only if reality responds by this date. That's not commitment, that's negotiation. And you can't negotiate with reality. You can only align with it. Alignment means you maintain your state because that's who you've decided to be, regardless of when or how circumstances shift. You're not doing it to get something. You're doing it because this is your natural way of being now. When that becomes true, when your state is no longer conditional on outcomes, that's when outcomes start appearing consistently, because you've stopped creating interference with your impatience or doubt. You've become a stable signal. Let's address the real challenge here. Fear. Fear that if you maintain this state and nothing changes, you've wasted your time. Fear that you're deluding yourself. Fear that this is just positive thinking dressed up in different language. Those fears are the old state trying to reassert itself. They're the old frequency attempting to pull you back because that's familiar. The old state knows how to operate. It has patterns and routines. The new state is unknown territory, and your mind resists the unknown. That's normal. Expect it, but don't obey it. When fear shows up, acknowledge it without letting it dictate your actions. You can feel afraid and still maintain your chosen state. The fear is just weather passing through. It doesn't change the foundation unless you let it. Here's what I want you to walk away with. Your state is everything, not your circumstances, not your history. Not what happened yesterday or what might happen tomorrow. Your state right now is creating what comes next. If you want something different to come next, you don't change the circumstances directly. You change the state. You choose it deliberately. You maintain it consciously. You defend it consistently. And you trust that reality will reorganize around it. Because that's how this works. You've been creating your entire life this way. You just didn't know it. Now you know. The question is whether you'll use this knowledge or let it become another concept you understand intellectually but never apply. Understanding changes nothing. Application changes everything. So choose your state right now, not later, not when things improve, right now. Decide who you're being regardless of what's happening. Then watch how quickly what's happening starts to shift. That's the real power, not over circumstances, over yourself. And when you master that, circumstances become irrelevant because you're creating from the inside out instead of reacting from the outside in. No more waiting for perfect conditions. No more negotiating with reality about when you'll finally step into who you're meant to be. The 10 principles we've covered aren't suggestions, they're the architecture of how manifestation actually works. Control what's yours, release what isn't. Generate your state before circumstances give you permission. Stop strangling outcomes with attachment. Align your signal by integrating thought, feeling, and action. The Stoics didn't theorize about this, they lived it through exile, loss, and chaos. They proved these principles work when everything else falls apart. You have the same capacity they did, same nervous system, same ability to choose your state, same power to create from the inside out. The only difference is whether you'll practice this daily or let it become another idea you agreed with but never embodied. Your next move determines everything, not tomorrow's move, the one you make right now. Choose your state. Defend it. Watch reality bend toward the frequency you're broadcasting. That's how you manifest everything you want, not by chasing it desperately, but by becoming the person who already has it. The work starts now.